Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hospitality for Hospitality, the podcast that brings the back of the house to the front. And in today's episode, we're going to tackle a big challenge that every hotelier faces, which is how can you make your guests return again and again in a world of so many options by giving them a more meaningful stay? Let us begin. So, for today's challenge, I have a very special guest, Andrew Swerloff, who is the co founder of Stay Open Hotels. Andrew, I think you'll do a much better job introducing yourself.
Thanks for having me on the podcast today. Yeah, excited to talk about this concept and topic. Quick rundown of my background. A lot of finance, private equity in Asia for a bunch of years, and then came back to the US and was heavily involved in real estate, primarily hotel finance and development, ranging from projects like the Waldorf Astoria in Beverly Hills to converting a 250,000 square foot office building near Los Angeles Airport into a 401 key Hyatt House, Hyatt Place hotel. And those experiences really led my co-founder and I to start a company called Stay Open Hotels, which was a reaction to the great brands that are out there, Hilton, Hyatt, Marriott, that produce great hotels, but a real need for something in the sort of high-end budget space, we call it. So something that's affordable, but you're not sacrificing the experience, the amenities, or the location. And so Stay Open Hotels effectively takes empty office and retail space and converts it into pod hotels. So
Wow.
effectively high-end bunk beds, and it's got sort of a layer of a high-end hostel environment, but in a very elevated setting. And working on some other things as well, but hospitality is deep in my bones, and I love always talking about it.
Amazing. So, why don't we just jump right into today's challenge and start with probably the biggest question? Why do you think it's so hard today to get guests to come back and stay in your properties?
Yeah, I mean, I'll obviously talk from the experiences that I've had in my career and the properties that I've developed or owned or been involved with from a management perspective. But I think there's certain components, obviously, of hotels, right? You're in the transient market, and so you're desiring to get tourists coming to stay at your place that may, obviously do it for vacation or for work, business. You may also just have corporate travelers just need a place to stay for the night. But in terms of really being able to bring guests, back to your space, and I think when we're talking about that, we're talking about places that do have something unique to offer. But I really think what is important, other than all of the great features that need to exist in a hotel, from your operations to your staff, and really creating a seamless experience, is the whole idea of hospitality. And I've thought a lot about this, and I actually just read a really good book called Unreasonable Hospitality, which I would actually recommend. Um, this idea of really bringing something unique or special to your guest. And to some degree, I think we've kind of stepped away from this mindset of really what hospitality is. And I think that is giving your guests a really special feeling that they can't get anywhere else. And that can come in a lot of different ways, but it's really providing either experiences or something unique in your space, or even more so, really helping staff within a hotel property understand what a guest may need and kind of anticipate what their needs may be, but
Mhm.
ultimately offering them something unique or special and memorable that stays with them. And I think ultimately, if you are successful with that, your hotel will certainly be remembered. It will be appreciated, and guests may actually decide to come back in the future.
The problem is the fact that people want to try different experiences, and it's very hard even, and we're going to talk about unique experiences, but even creating a unique experience, it needs to be something that memorable that
Mm.
people would like to have it again, and not just a one-time thing to tell their friends and move on. So my question to you will be, do you think it's mainly with the younger generation who kind of try to travel and see the world and post it on Instagram, and business travelers usually kind of go to the exact same experience and property, or is it all over?
Great question. Obviously, a lot in there, and different demographics, and changes, and obviously everything from younger demographics that are Instagram focused and want to travel and experience new things all the time, to obviously families and how they want to spend time together. As I was listening to this, I'm trying to think of how to sort of bring it all together, and I think where I stand with this, I think one, I always like to talk from experience. So Stay Open Hotels was really built to provide a really comfortable space. This idea that could you create a space that, one, is in the best location that you can find in whatever specific city you are, but two, can you create something that feels good when you walk inside? And I think with our property in Venice, we've done a very good job of, when people enter the space, they feel like they're walking into a home. It doesn't feel something foreign. It feels very warm. And, a level of that is our wonderful staff that really makes people feel good when they, walk through the door. And that happens, as most hotel owners know, that happens way before the guest actually walks into your facility. It has to happen, along the journey, and, making sure that things are as easy for the guest as possible. And, I think there's lots that can be done all along the value chain of a hotel, and obviously what Rico is doing, in the back of house. These are all wonderful things that just go into making hotels run better, which are very, very challenging, complex
Mhm.
businesses because there's so much people involvement. But I think in terms of just the other element of it in Stay Open, what I think has been amazing, and I think why people continually come back to our property, is really the people that they meet. So
Mhm.
we created Stay Open not only for the experiential side, which I'll talk about a little bit, but also community and connection. Um, for years, we were doing sort of the standard branded hotels, and you kind of get fed the box, and that's sort of what it looks like. And huge, right? Because also these are extremely capital intensive projects. They're very challenging to build out. But I think what is missing, and I think, what COVID really kind of helped us all understand, is that at the end of the day, there's all these bells and whistles and experiences and outward things. But at the end of the day, it's all about human connection. And with Stay Open, that's the magic of it, is that, 14 strangers come into our property that have never met each other before. And they walk into this space where there's a communal kitchen. And, at 6 o'clock one night, somebody decides to like cook a meal. And then they're inviting other people that are staying in the property to join them, over a meal that they just cooked. That's something super special. And then all of a sudden they have a meal together, they learn more about each other, and you've created, one of the most wonderful experiences, I think, that can be created, which is getting to know somebody else and learning about where they come from, who they are. It helps you understand yourself. But I don't know, there's just something about us as human beings where the human connection component is just such a special thing. And so back to the original question of, let's say a younger demographic. I mean, they're yearning obviously for experiences. I'm 40, so I'm kind of on the tail end of the millennials here, but um, I think, the experiential component is important, and we'll get into maybe talking about some elements to that. But I think ultimately, if people come to a place and it's designed intentionally and really focused on how to create spaces that bring people together and allow for connection, I think those are some of the most magical things one can do within a hotel space, because you've transcended just the building blocks or the brick and mortar. You've actually given the space a soul and people connecting within it. And you never know where those relationships will go, but I think those are always something that I remember from all my vacations, is the people that I meet along the way.
Well, that's very interesting because you mentioned a couple points. Communities, this is something very, very strong. How can you build a community in your property? And we will talk about that through maybe workshops or things that bring people together. Because from my experiences coming to hotel, you stay in the room, you go to the pool, you go back to the room. So how can you actually bring people? And we need to ask ourselves, is it only for the hostel vibe, or it can be for also for a resort for families? Can they also enjoy those type of communities that you're talking of? So I would really love to get into some actual examples. How can we bring that to different type of properties?
Yeah. 100%, it can be brought to a diverse range of properties. It's not an easy thing to do. It's almost a little bit of a different business model than what hotels are kind of set up for, which is providing accommodations with amenities, which is very much like, we have stuff, come enjoy our stuff. But I think going in this direction of then layering in the experiences, I think is a very wise choice for a lot of hotel owners. And that is not just something that is a profit center, which we all think about in our hotels, like we're running real businesses and we need to make sure that we're running successful companies. But these experiential sides add a lot of intangibles. So in terms of building that out, you can start small and grow. But for example, my experiences with it, you mentioned obviously Stay Open, which is a high-end hostel company, but we have an age range of we've had anywhere from like 21 to 60, which is outrageous. And it's, I think, an element of like a lot of people that keep coming back to the space is the fact that it is so much fun to be in a Stay Open space and connecting with people, but also the experiential side. So we've done, and we're in Venice, so, and part of my love is a lot of kind of more spiritual practices. So we do yoga classes, we've had breathwork classes, we've done sound baths.
Nice.
We've had a variety of different types of workshops and events in the space, and I think people really appreciate that. I mean, you go into things like breath work and sound baths, like you can create a pretty deep emotional response. So it is a risk, right, as an owner to kind of take that on, but it is truly amazing the effect that those experiences have on the individuals that partook in them and Stay Open. And ultimately were unique and incredible experiences brought to their lives. And so people will talk about that at our space, and that's why they come back. So, I think of this similar line of thinking to provide experiences, and it could be about bringing people together. It could be about providing something unique and different to your guests. But it's all of the same vein of like bringing people together into a community to have like a connection over something. And so that's the beauty of what we've done with the experiences, is they typically will lead to a deeper connection in the room because everybody just went through something really unique and special. And that usually can facilitate into deeper conversation and a deeper human connection.
So the bottom line is bringing people together. It doesn't matter if it's a hostel or a huge resort in Mexico. It's about making sure that people come to your property and you place the infrastructure for those experiences to happen, and you can change the experience every single time. So even if I return back to exact same resort, yes, it might be the same pool, but hey, now I have different workshops. I have cooking classes, I have ice bath, I have vipassana, I have yoga. All those kind of things can change based on demand. And it also brings maybe another stream of revenue for local people to come visit your property. So regardless of the actual location or who you are, they're here for the experience and to meet new people, which is very important in today's world where everyone work from home and they just want to meet people. Even if you're a family and you come as a family, sometimes you just want to leave your kids at the pool and do something more meaningful for you as an adult. I love it. I think this is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was a really good summation of the importance of this, and you kind of brought up a variety of experiences that can be offered, but I thought 2 points were really spot on. I think one is this idea of bringing in great teachers from the community, right, to then utilize the space of your hotel, because honestly, at a lot of hotels there is immense amount of unutilized space, right?
Mhm.
Because maybe the conference rooms are not being used as much, and that's maybe changing kind of post COVID now. But still, these are really good spaces that hotels have that they spend a lot of money on, but are extremely underutilized. So what you're doing is you're allowing great people within the community that have great talents to kind of come into your space and deliver something special to your guests, which, as we've talked about, facilitates a lot of wonderful things, from just everybody in a shared experience to then potential human connection post that experience, because we've all done something together. And then another great component is bringing in, locals from wherever your hotel is located, which, is not really thought about typically. Typically hotels are kind of set up to attract people from other places to that location. And obviously it's the overnight accommodations. But I think this is really unique to bring in the local community, which, gives like a pulse and a vibe, because you're getting a sense of that local place. And honestly, with how we think about stay open, being able to bring in the local community potentially adds just tons of benefits in terms of just other companies out there, other products out there. It's just it's I think a better way to think about the hotel business, other than people book a bed and they come from somewhere and they stay with us. I think, what about that local environment? How do you bring that in? And I think that brings some incredible intangibles to the property that I can't measure in return on investment, but I can certainly say that it would bring an energy and a vibe into the space that makes people feel like, this is a really special environment.
So let's be practical. Let's say I want to start my own kind of workshops, cooking sessions, or yoga or vipassana. What would be your advice to do that? My mind goes to let me go on TikTok, find a very kind of an influencer in my area that does those kind of things, bring them over, bring local people, and reserve some spots to maybe some of the guests, see the experience, how they rate you out, or how they give you feedback afterwards. And based on that, try to bring more and more different workshops. Or what would be your advice there? How to become more practical on that?
Yeah, I think it's good to talk about how you set things up. I have ideas, but I'll talk about what I did with Stay Open. In terms of yoga, like my co-founder took from this great yoga instructor at his club, and really liked the guy and ended up bringing him over to the space. And then we were setting up weekly yoga sessions that Stay Open, the team, would do with actually our hotel guests, which was kind of cool. So we got to kind of experience all that together. But, that opened up a doorway in terms of me just being, my desire a lot is these holistic sort of offerings, from breath work to sound baths to, sort of musical somatic experiences. And so as I found people just in my network and things that I do on a personal level, I brought that in to stay open. So I think that's the gateway is in my opinion, like, don't try to find something. So in a hotel, obviously you have your GM, right? That's your life force, right? In a hotel, the hardest working people, toughest jobs on the planet in terms of managing everybody in the space. I if the GM doesn't have the availability, finding somebody on the team to steward the experiential side, and that individual tapping into things that they enjoy and the networks that they have, because I think it is important, because look, I'll say it in terms of yoga or breath work, like I've had some good classes and I've had some bad classes, but that, and I'm not necessarily the arbiter of good or bad, but I have to base this on something. And so if I have a great yoga experience, that's the teacher that I potentially would want to bring to my property. So I think it all starts with something, whoever the person is that's going to run this, it's their passion and, something they believe others would be interested in. And then in their network, they have some great teachers or individuals involved in a certain modality practice, and they bring it to the space. I think that always is a good way. Plus it's authentic and real. And I think that's the world we live in now, is that, like, where in the past you could probably get away with generic and boring and it would work enough. I think in this day and age, there's a lot of options for a lot of people. And I think the best thing you can do is try to be as authentic, in a truly real way, because authentic now even has become kind of like a buzzword. But I think that's like a good way to start. And then, you brought up some other, like at big resorts and stuff. I mean, you can start to do really specialized things. So like what you talked about of Vipassana, that's a silent meditation retreat for people that may not be familiar with that. I've done that for the last 3 years of my life. And that can be done, obviously, at some great resorts. It's a different way of booking out space in your resort, and you have to be ready to facilitate something like that. But those are options on the table where you're tapping into deep experiences that people are doing on a multi-day workshop, or whatever the program is that's set up, and they're needing space, right? They need to go somewhere, and they need to have the space and the hospitality to service their specific needs. And in this case, Vipassanas are typically 7 to 10 days of silence, and those are typically in nature-based locations. And so there's just a lot out there. But again, I think it's important for any hotel owner and the management team to choose things that I think resonate locally, fit with the space, and really comes from an extension of passions that they have that will ultimately hopefully be something that their guests will be interested in.
Yeah, I think Vipassana is great because they cannot complain about the food or anything like this. So they're just.
You can still pass notes, but yeah, usually the food at these Vipassanas are really good.
Yes. So what about revenue? Bottom line, I know that this is very important. We don't want to have another outlet which is just out there as a service for the guests, but we're losing money. So are those initiatives are actually profitable, other than the fact that you're getting good marketing for your social media and things like this, and get your guests returning more? Can you actually make money out of those?
Yeah, I think there's smart ways of doing it. I ultimately, you got to look at the fact that if you're in a hotel and you have space that's underutilized, the space that's not being used is not generating anything. It's
Yeah.
just empty space. And so you start there, and then you say, okay, well, what do I want to offer in my facility? And I think there's two ROIs. I think, yes, certainly there's a way to make money off of this. And I think the way to do that is, working with teachers that are in your network that provide something unique that guests will pay for, and then working, some sort of revenue split. And, in that, you're not having to really do much other than the time commitment, of sort of putting it together. These are not necessarily like, depending on where you can scale it, but I would say these are more about, again, creating unique experiences that bring people together that hopefully lead to people saying, hey, this place is really special. Word of mouth saying, hey, you should stay here, or potentially they themselves come back to the space at some point in the future. But I do think these are the unique sort of offerings that can be added on to the basic hotel components that do bring not only the unique experience, but yeah, you can make a little bit of money off of it. I'm not saying this is like your massive revenue source. But there is actual ways. I mean, if you're renting out your facility for specific events, depending on the size of your property, that's great bulk business that you may have never actually thought about before. And then obviously there's just all the intangibles, in terms of what that may do for the local community, the fact that you may have a local yoga teacher that comes and does a session there, and he or she is super appreciative of the fact that you've opened up space and, created demand for their gift, which then generates back into the community. Like, it's great what this hotel is doing.
Yeah.
Also just us locals, right? Actually coming into your hotel and checking it out. And maybe they wouldn't have traveled to your hotel within that specific location because they're local and a hotel is not a place that they would typically go to, but you brought them in for a really cool experience. And maybe they come back or they tell people, hey, this is like a great hotel to stay at. So I think there's a lot of intangibles there. And I don't think hospitality for sure. And again, I go back to like a reasonable hospitality, and Will Guidara, I really liked what he said, which is, hospitality is kind of 95% the bare bones, right? Just making sure all the stuff is working right in the hotel. But then how about that 5%? And that's where you can go a little above and beyond. And it's a little unique in his model with high-end restaurants, but I think it still carries over to hotels where, that 5% doesn't necessarily mean like you're blowing a ton of money to create something, really expensive or super high end and special for the guests. I think it's a multitude of things. And I think experiences is a segment of that. And really, again, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast about hospitality, like we need to come back to this idea that hospitality is about giving people a feeling, right? Like going into some place and eliciting some sort of sensation feeling. And I think a lot of times in this business, in this industry, I feel like it has gotten to be very transactional. And I think that's not good. And I think there's an opportunity here because people want to feel stuff, right? And they want to feel good about things. And I think we can do this within hotel spaces.
One question that came to me after you started to say about the hotel setting the structure for everything, what about liability? So if I bring someone to an ice bath and God forbid gets heart attack, what happened? Who's responsible for that? Just for us to measure the risk and reward on those kind of special initiatives. Because if there is one thing I know from Rico is that hoteliers don't like changes, even though they want to be very tech forward, they want to be very creative, but they don't like to change things just because it's such a complicated business. And if things are working and you're generating revenues, don't touch it. Even though you can triple sometimes, but it is what it is. So what happens in terms of risk and reward here? Do we have any problems with those kind of initiatives, cooking sessions or Vipassana, or we're dealing with people here eventually?
It's a good ops question. And, I come from Stay Open where I built, the company from the ground up in terms of all of our ops. And it's a startup, but, the amount of time and effort that I put into our contracts and waivers and just making sure, like, you just have to. It's just part of the nature of our business. And, we're in California, so you got to be extra vigilant in this state. But it's depending on where you are with the size of your hotel and the luxury of being able to have conversations with your attorneys for new endeavors. Like, you just got to set things up. I mean, there's yoga studios, there's sauna, ice bath places, right? These are all retail shops that are available that offer services. And so just running the right protocol of
So
making
lots of
sure
waivers, basically.
lots of waivers. Yeah. Not liable for it. And honestly, like, sure, negligence is a whole different thing. But like,
Yeah.
if you're offering a great experience and service, you just need to make sure the waiver is signed and you're protected, and you run things the right way. And honestly, run things the right way should be fairly ingrained in your ops model if you
True.
want to be a good business and actually have guests come back a second time.
Yes, that's true. Okay, so let's recap a little bit of what we talked today. So we brought up a lot of important concept, which is the first one is community, and how you do that through meaningful experiences, which bring people together. Those meaningful experiences will make your guests return for the same experience or even a new one through your different workshop. It works for select service. It works for small hotels, hostels, big resorts. They can all have the exact same model here. And basically, are there any other things that you can think of, good tips that you can give our hoteliers friends?
No, I think that was a really good summary. I think it's just a matter of starting small, right? If you don't have anything like this, test it out, see what it does. I want to encourage, because along the value chain for hotels, it takes a lot to create a hotel. Everything, especially if you've developed from the ground up, like, it's a very long, 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 long process and a very expensive one. And at times, we get bogged down in building the space and then bringing in the management team to run the space. And I think what needs to happen, and some great lifestyle brands, I think, just do a wonderful job. And honestly, I think it's when you stay at a hotel and things are just so good, you're like, this was amazing, but I don't think you entirely know what went into creating that feeling. Like,
Yes.
probably some really, really talented people that thought through a lot of different things to create that experience that you received. But, I think it's just in this industry encouraging more innovation. And I think this is not such an overwhelming one to offer up something unique from an experience standpoint. And it doesn't have to be some of the things I've talked about from the more holistic offerings. That's just a passion of mine, and even so much so that I'm opening up a retreat center space in Santa Fe, New Mexico, that really is going to focus on this. But it's going to be hospitality, nature based, contemplative wellness center that offers multi-day experiences, and it's really about a different approach to sort of hotel or an experience about introspection and allowing people to live better lives. But I think in any of these businesses, there's always the opportunity to create unique experiences, and it's just figuring out what works best for your property, and also finding the right team member that can push it forward and in a small way and see where it goes. But we need to innovate more in the hotel space. I just feel like there can be a lot of improvements all across the value chain. And at times, because they're such complex businesses, I do find that certain teams are resistant to adopting new possibilities. And I get it. You're busy. It's hard to like find the time to entertain a new concept, a new technology, a new experience, a new way of doing things because you've done it a certain way. And frankly, it's a very, people intensive business. Like in the hotel by, LAX, I mean, I think potentially there's 50 to 100 people working on property at one time, so it's extremely complicated. But the need to bring these tools in at times will lead to benefits, whether that's obviously augmenting guest experience, freeing up time of staff, which I think is really important because that brings back the hospitality side of, hey, if my staff has less time that they're dealing with the mundane and the admin, and they have more time to be able to engage with the guests, again, you're being able to create those special bonds or unique elements within your property. So just encouraging more innovation across the board.
I love it. So before we say goodbye, you mentioned Santa Fe and the new retreat center you're working on. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm still like one, it's been a year and a half journey. So it's been a special one. Um, Certainly the first time in my life where I'm pretty clear on meaning and purpose. And so this is what I want to create. But yeah, I'm trying to create kind of the modern day wellness retreat center that offers some really special teachers and workshops that can lead to transformational change in people's lives and allowing them to live better lives. I'm a big proponent that the world, specifically the United States, like a lot of us that work really hard and are always focused on, more, like we all need rest. And, there's vacations and then there's true rest, which is, more introspective and slowing down. And God, the things that come from that, as I've learned in my life, it's, better relationships, better focus and concentration, more creativity, connecting with intuition, diving into the body. So, spent a long time looking for a property. I own some property in Santa Fe, and it's always been a special place in my life. And I think one of the best places to start a retreat center. And, there's been a conversation recently with an individual that owns a gorgeous site, 150-acre site, and is already running an existing retreat and a new relationship. But I'm pretty excited where that may go, and hopefully this is the opportunity, and hope to share more about that as the paperwork hopefully gets executed. But still a lot to do, but that seems to be the opportunity for me, and hopefully I'll be able to open up a space pretty soon.
Wow. I hope I'm going to be the first guest in your opening, and I
Love
haven't
to
been
have
there and I already want to come back. So you're doing
you.
something very meaningful. And this is exactly what we talked about. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. It was very meaningful and helpful. And I'm sure that our hotelier friends are going to take a lot of this conversation. So thanks again. And I'm definitely going to see you in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.